Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. In this video, we're kicking off a series on using WayScript as an internal development platform. What that means is we'll be building all the tools that we'll need for our business that we're creating inside of WayScript, all hosted in one place and implementing best practices as we go. What we'll be doing in this video is creating our initial internal site, that way we can add tools to it. We'll also talk about some of the basics on how we can do this with WayScript and why it makes it so good to use it as an internal development platform. Also, we'll be doing most of this live, so we'll be working through problems as we go. If that interests you, feel free to tune into this video and be sure to subscribe to see the future videos in the series. Getting started, we're at the WayScript homepage. At the WayScript homepage, we can create something called a workspace. Inside this workspace is where we'll put all the tools that we need for our business, along with inviting any members from our team that needs to access those tools. In this example, we'll be creating a simple startup. So I'll say startup workspace, but you can name yours whatever you need. Once we have that, I'll click on create, and this will put us inside of our workspace. Once we're inside our workspace, I want to highlight just a few points so you can see the power of using WayScript as an IDP, an internal development platform. What we can do inside of our workspace is we can click on our workspace name in the top left, go to settings, and we can invite members to our group. This is important because we can maintain this in one location. We can invite members to our group so they can use our tools that we're creating, and we can give power to these members to build their own tools. That's pretty cool that we can manage this all in one place, because that means we're freeing up a DevOps engineer to not have to worry about adding members to a team. Instead, all we need to do is click add member, put in their WayScript email, and submit. So that means we can add different members to our team. You see that we also get application keys. These application keys are very powerful, and it means we can have programmatic access to all the tools that we create and a lot of extras that are included inside of WayScript. Going back to our workspace, what we'll do first in this example is we're building all the tools that a startup business may need as we go through the series. So in this one, let's create an internal site, and I want to show you how quickly we can set this up. In our workspace, we can click on new layer in the top right, and we'll say something like internal site home, and we'll click on create. Pretty much what a layer allows us to do is to use a pre-configured Docker container and build out our tools in an environment that we can control from the WayScript interface. That sounds like a lot, but there's benefits to this, and I want you to think through these as we go. What we're doing here is we're creating an environment in one place where we don't have to distribute these environments to different people. Instead, we know all the requirements live in this one place. There's very little maintenance because we don't have to maintain this across different computers, and we can just do it all from one interface. Now that we have all of that discussed, let's go and create our tool. To create our tool inside of our internal development platform is pretty straightforward. We get a file browser over here to the left, and we'll click on new file. A quick note here is that we will code everything within the platform just to show you that we can, but it is also possible to code in whatever text editor you want and upload the files too. There's also a desktop version of WayScript, and we'll use that in the next video to show you how it works. But in this video, we'll try to use the lowest lift solution. We'll use the online editor. We'll say new file. And since we're creating some type of application, let's do it in Python and say app.py. We'll be creating a Flask app to host our internal site homepage, but you can also code in any other language that you want. So we'll say something like server.js. And if your language somehow is not supported, be sure to let us know that you need support for that specific language, and we'll be happy to add it. So what we're doing is we want this app.py file to be a Flask server. I will go and get some code from our documentation, and we'll paste that in. So within our docs, we have a host of Flask server, and we will copy this and paste it in. So this is pretty basic Flask code. All we're saying is import Flask. We'll create a requirements.txt to make sure that we add each of these as we go. So Flask. Now that we have that, we're creating our Flask application, and at the home page, we have a function. So now I want to show you one powerful feature of WayScript. Let's say that whenever we want a user to go to our home page, we want to be able to identify the user and give them the appropriate content that they need. This is important because you could imagine that we give different information to different people on different teams. So if the supply manager logs in, maybe they want to see a supply of all the products on their homepage. I'll show you how to do that with the WayScript SDK. So what we're doing is identifying users. We will copy this. This is in the docs too, and I'll be sure to link all of this down below. That way you can do this along with me. So we'll just create a simple function up at the top. So instead of this, what we'll do is get rid of that. We'll say function get user details, and we'll keep that. All right, we'll get rid of that little bit of code. Perfect. So now if we want to get the user's details, we can use this function in any of our routes and get that information and return it, or return some type of specific information to that user. So at this point, we can now give dynamic responses. Let's give a response. So at our homepage, let's say we have a template to return. To do that, we can say on our Flask import, we'll do something called render template. And at the same time, we'll also do a request import. This allows us to get information from forms or JSON API post request. So we have this. Now in our function, let's say index page. And what we'll do is we want to render a template. The way that Flask works, this is just specific to this framework. All your templates need to live in a folder called templates. Since we're creating many different tools in this series, what we need to do is have a base template and a template that inherits that base. What that means is, let's say we want a nav bar on every single page, but we want different content on different endpoints. We can do that by saying new file. We will say base.html, and we will say index.html. So at this point, what we need to do is to put in our base.html. We'll be using Bootstrap to speed things up in this example, but I want to show you how we can go and get a template. That way, you don't have to use the same one as me. We will go to the Bootstrap Examples page. So you can pick any of these that you want. I will try to pick a very simple one. That way, if we want to build custom components as we go, we can throughout the series. So I will probably pick this one, but of course, if one of these looks better to you, feel free to pick it. So I will click on this. I will view the page source, and I will copy all of this. So pasting this in on our base.html, we don't need all of this information. The way template inheritance works within Flask applications is we just want all the content that we want to be on multiple pages in the base.html. So what that means is we probably want to keep the nav bar within our base.html, and we want to keep all the stuff that we don't have to keep on adding to each of our pages. So in their specific example here, it looks like they're using relative referencing, which would work if we went and downloaded the CSS and put it into our project, but we probably don't want to do that. That's more to maintain. So instead, what we'll do is go to the Bootstrap introduction, and we will copy a CDN for it. So we'll paste that in for our CSS. And now let's go down, and we have relative references here too. We will get rid of this. And we will paste this in here. Perfect. So at this point, I want to probably remove most of this over to our index.html. Let's do that after we deploy this, because I want to show you how quickly we can get something deployed, and then we'll worry more about the specifics of how the page looks. So to deploy this in the WayScript internal development platform, it is very straightforward. We can use the .trigger system, and we can click on new trigger, deploy. You see that already gives us an endpoint where this will be hosted at. Our command to run will just be what we type into a command prompt or a terminal, which in Flask is Flask run. We will put a port and a host. If you need this information, it is linked down below too. It's in our documentation in this quick start. So host the Flask server, and it is right here. So once we have that, we will match the port to our command, and we'll click on test. You see the button here, it says test because we're working in a dev environment. I'll show you more about that, but it's a pretty cool feature where we have two different environments within our one layer, which is pretty cool. So we have our dev state and we can make a prod state, and I'll show you how to do that too. So within our dev state, we can make these changes and we don't have to make them live. We can test them out on their own endpoint. And whenever we want to push them, it's one click, well, 2 clicks, and we can get that to prod. So we've clicked on test, and now let's go to this endpoint. The CSS might not be working, but I just want to show you that we can host an application very quickly. We get back a hello world at our index, which probably just means that we haven't returned it yet. So we need to return it. So to do that, we'll say render template, and we'll put in the template name. This will be index.html. We'll have to come back and change this, but for now, we will put base.html. So within our trigger, we will go back and test it again. We'll give it just a second to get that deployed, and we will refresh. Perfect. So we already have a content up, and it's hosted. Let's say that we wanted to get a version out as quickly as possible to our prod site. We're not done working on it, but we need a version stood up in a prod environment. To do that, we can use the deploy feature within WayScript. This deploy is over here to the left. We'll click on deploy and deploy again. So there's our 2 clicks, and we've deployed this to a prod environment. We can view prod, and you see that we can't make any changes here because it's not good practice. So it prevents other members on your team that might not know what a dev and prod environment are. It prevents changes. We don't get access to a terminal. We can just view what state it's in. So within our triggers, we can go to this brand new endpoint and click on it. So you see that we have 2 environments set up, and we'll come back and redeploy this once we're done. So here's our prod page. Here's our dev page. You can see it in the URL, and we'll go back to WayScript. So to go back to that dev environment, we'll click on dev in the top left, and we'll get to work. So we have all this code inside of our base.html. Throughout this series, we're building multiple tools. So we want to pass that base.html to multiple different pages as we go. To do that, we'll use a Flask benefit and do template inheritance. So to do that, we'll say extend base.html. What this will be is something called block, and then we can name it what we want. We'll say content is pretty standard, and we'll say end block. Perfect. So now all the code that we want to pass back to our base.html will live in between these 2 tags. So within our base.html, what we'll do is go and pull out that code that we need. Back in our base.html, we probably want to leave our header alone. That way we pass that nav bar to all of our pages. We'll go down and get this information here. We can probably leave the footer too, but I will copy this begin page content. We'll get rid of it. We'll go back to index.html and paste it in. So now to work with Flask and template inheritance, we'll go back to base.html where we got rid of that code, and we will put those same tags in. They have to match. We'll say end block. Perfect. So awesome. So now we have our base.html set up. We can make pages that inherit from that base.html very quickly. So we can set up multiple pages very fast, and we can deploy very quickly too. So a lot of the what we call activation energy, which is all the work that it takes to get something deployed and up and working, is pretty low to do it in this way. And that's what makes an internal development platform so sweet. So we can test this. And I believe it's just been a few minutes, but we already have tools up and working. So we will click on test. We will make sure that it's working the way that we expect it to. It looks like it's not. So that's just a problem with my code here. Block content in block extends base.html. It looks like we forgot to make that one change that I knew we would forget to. So in app.py, we still have this base.html, and we will say index.html. Now we should get this working. A quick tip, if you will, if you want to do this in your Python projects, you can go into your environment variables and say Flask env. We'll make this development and we'll click add env. Of course, you'll want to remove this as your product gets more and more close to prod, but for now it's fine. So we have this set up where now we don't have to redeploy every time. We will have to deploy once more or test once more to get that environment variable into our application. And now we are returning index.html from our route of index, which inherits from our base and returns this content. So this is our dev one. I will refresh this. And now you see that we have all the content set up right here very quickly. Perfect. So we have our internal homepage set up, and now we can start coding in HTML or bring our own HTML and have it hosted very simply inside of WayScript. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I just want to show you a few more things that I told you that we would talk about earlier. So inside of an internal development platform, there's a bunch of benefits, and I want to share just a few of those with you. That way you know why we're doing this in the first place. So along with being able to very rapidly deploy projects like this one and being able to invite team members, coworkers to build these projects with you or use your tools, you get a lot of benefits of having something out of the box. In this example, you saw that we were prevented from doing certain practices that we might not know if we weren't the most technical minded. Inside of our prod environment, we have implemented best practices to prevent people from doing things that are detrimental to your tools. There's a lot of knowledge that is built into the WayScript platform that does very similar things throughout the entire product. And I want to show you a few of those. So we get readmes and we get deploys, but you also see that we have an alerts icon over here. A lot of tools that are built in production environments that are just one-off tools on people's computers are not maintained, and they don't have alerts whenever they go down. Instead, what happens within a business, a tool goes down and you don't know it until you need the tool, of course. So within WayScript, we get these alerts that let us know that our tool is no longer working long before we need to actually use the tool. This, along with logs, lets us know when our tool is accessed and what state we get back whenever it is accessed. So we get the commands, the statuses, the source of the interaction, and when it was started, which is pretty cool to have logging built into any application that we build. These are things that as you begin to scale your business, you start thinking about more and more. Instead, what you can do is with WayScript, you can just start out with these best practices already implemented in every tool you make. It means you don't have to go back and make it again. So now we can publish tools and we can do different endpoints all from one place. Publishing tools is very powerful, and I don't want to gloss over it because it shows a paradigm within WayScript that is very cool. This paradigm is only built at once, and we can do that by creating public endpoints that we can share with other people. Or let's say we had multiple different companies or locations where we wanted to build different tools out. Instead of building each tool very specific to one place, we can have a hub of tools where we can just clone them to different places. We can do this by making them public or duplicating them from your own account. That means you don't have to copy and paste code, get different projects set up on different websites. You can have it all in one place for every business need that you have. So there's a few, and we'll go through many, many more about why the internal development platform of WayScript is so powerful for this application. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. We'll be happy to help you in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.